opportunities to recover.
Back from that building before what you're about to see again here on videotape, knowing
There's a handful of things that you really can't make YouTube videos on.
because of
This is one of them.
since shortly after 9
For some reason, some people consider the September 11th terrorist attacks to be a sensitive subject. They generally find it to be in poor taste to make bizarre claims and speculation. Yeah, the towers were actually holograms. The real buildings were in an airfield somewhere in Ohio, about an event that led to the deaths of nearly 3,000 people, and like 1 million Iraqis. So I'm not going to be doing that. I'm not going to be speculating about anything directly involving the deaths of real-life people with real loved ones. In fact, I'm not going to be presenting or putting forth any theories at all. We're not going to be diving into the what or how, A, because I'm absolutely not allowed to, and B, because that has all been explained to death thousands of times over the past quarter century, so we're going to be sticking to the party line regarding what happened that day. My goal is merely to give some context towards the financial and historical side of things in the hopes that you might notice a pretty compelling why. This is the story you may not know about how a couple hours after the 9/11 attacks, a third completely evacuated building suddenly collapsed, destroying the evidence for basically every single financial crime of the 1990s. If you can't tell, this is a video about the unbelievably incriminating financial ties of Building 7, the other building that collapsed that day. Now, let's begin with the government's explanation of what happened, courtesy of the National Institute of Standards Technology, or NIST for those who hate acronyms. On September 11, 2001, WTC-7, a 47-story steel-framed building, collapsed at 5:20 p.m. due to fires ignited by debris from the Twin Towers collapse. These fires, fueled by office furnishings, staplers and post-it notes, caused thermal expansion in floor beams, dislodging a girder from column 79, leading to a progressive collapse. Man, demolitions engineers are like scamming the hell out of us if that's all it takes to make a building do that. For the sake of this video, that is what happened. There are no alternate explanations or theories. For example, the kind of thing that, were it to exist, might have been done by the structural engineering department at the University of Alaska, Fairbanks. University of Alaska, what would they know about secret government crap? This is a good thing, because in this hypothetical scenario, websites like YouTube or Wikipedia would probably not allow people to talk about this purely fictional, hypothetical 125-page paper called A Structural Reevaluation of the Collapse of World Trade Center 7, and that would make this very frustrating to talk about. But because there's no $314,000 four-year investigative study and associated 125-page paper called A Structural Reevaluation of the Collapse of World Trade Center 7 by Professor J. Leroy Hulsey, Ph.D., P.E.S.E., the best explanation is the NIST report. So, we're gonna move on. Enter Larry Silverstein, aka Lucky Larry, a New York real estate mogul with a rabbit's foot surgically attached to his soul. In July 2001, 6 weeks before 9/11, he leased the entire World Trade Center complex for a $13 million down payment. $13 million for a 10 million square foot property in Lower Manhattan? It's kind of like buying a Ferrari for the price of a Happy Meal. But here's the catch. The WTC was a financial black hole. Why? Well, remember, it was built in the 70s. It had a lot of asbestos in it. Like, a lot. Yeah, as in, the estimated cost of removing said asbestos was projected to be a minimum of $1 billion. A lot. This asbestos had to be removed by the end of the year, which sort of made the property a bit of a money pit, to put it lightly, until, that wasn't really a concern anymore. Furthermore, right before 9/11, Larry took out insurance policies on the WTC worth $3.55 billion, specifically covering terrorist attacks. When the towers and WTC-7 go down, Larry's lawyers pull a galaxy brain move and argue that each plane was a separate event. The insurers cried foul, but after a legal battle, Larry walked away with $4.55 billion. That is a 34,000% return on his $13 million in under 2 years. Fun fact, Larry's payout included $861 million just for WTC-7 alone, despite it being just a fraction of the complex's size. Someone hit the jackpot at the Tragedy Casino. Oh, but wait, there's more. Silverstein had extensive ties to the Carlyle Group, a private equity firm that's, really evil. We'll get to them shortly. So, WTC-7 had what could be conservatively described as an interesting tenant list, which we will now go through. First off, the Secret Service. Okay. Next, the SEC. the Securities and Exchange Commission, i.e. the people who investigate stock market shenanigans. They're going to be important as this goes on, which you may have guessed by the number of strings. La CIA, the company, the United States Central Intelligence Agency. Presumably, you are familiar. This was their New York field office. The New York City Office of Emergency Management. Well, at least they were close by. Everyone's favorite place to get a letter from, the IRS. The Department of Defense, from war. The NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Federal Home Loan Bank. The Standard Chartered Bank. American Express. Provident Bank, now known as PNC. Sorry, there's a bit of a lull in the middle, but back to the good stuff. ITT Hartford, also known as Hartford Insurance. This is one of the companies with whom Larry Silverstein took out a multi-billion-dollar terrorism insurance policy on the WTC complex. Finally, the anchor tenant, occupying more than half the building, Evil Investment Bank Hall of Famer, basis for Michael Lewis's excellent book Liar's Poker, Salomon Brothers. To rewind briefly back to the SEC, at the time of the collapse, they had a whole lot of spicy stuff in the office. Investigation files into Citigroup's cooked books, Enron's Ponzi scheme, as well as the big one, all the records of the massive short selling of airline stocks right before 9/11. Oh, did you not know about that? Yeah, in the 3 days leading up to 9/11, a statistically extremely anomalous number of airline industry shorts were placed. Like hundreds of millions of dollars of shorts. On American and United Airlines, the exact ones hit. Those shorts netted billions, but after WTC7's collapse, 90% of the SEC's files exploded, so we'll never know who cashed out. Convenient. Back to Salomon Brothers. They merged with Travelers, one of the other companies with whom the WTC complex was insured in July, to form Citigroup in '98. Speaking of Citigroup, let's take a look at a different group to whom they were closely tied. Let's talk Carlyle Group. Carlyle is a private equity titan with investments in defense, aerospace, and oil. The stuff that booms after a forever war kicks off. One of their top dogs, David Rubenstein, was good friends with Larry Silverstein. Let's split a bottle of 82 Chateau Lafite and swap secrets. Good friends. But that's burying the lead on the real story, which is that Carlyle had extensive business ties to the Bin Laden family. Of the Bin Ladens? Yes. He was a Nepo baby? Carlyle's roster reads like a deep state yearbook. Former President George H.W. Bush was a senior advisor. Former CIA Director Frank Carlucci was a board member. When 9/11 triggered a global war and defense stocks skyrocketed, Carlyle's portfolio got fat. Now, their ties to Silverstein and the Bin Ladens don't really necessarily prove anything on their own yet, but this web is stickier than a casting couch, and I have a feeling that we'll be seeing these guys again. As Carlyle's investments thrived post 9/11, while Larry rebuilt the World Trade Center complex with his billions, the Carlyle Group was playing 6 degrees of Bin Laden while cashing war profiteering checks. So there's plenty of shady connections throughout this. Carlyle Group is connected to the Department of Defense, World Trade Center 7 tenant, via, amongst other things, the Bradley contract of their subsidiary, United Defense LP. The Carlyle Group is connected to Saudi Arabia via managing the money of the Bin Laden family. Carlyle Group is connected to Larry Silverstein via his close and long-standing relationship with David Rubenstein. Travelers Group was one of the 22 companies that insured the WTC complex. In the late 90s, they acquired Salomon Brothers, the anchor tenant of WTC7. Speaking of those 22 companies, it's hard to find a list of what these are, so here you go. This is pulled from, financial records. Salomon Brothers wound up having their files relating to the WorldCom scandal destroyed, and the successor, Travelers Group, got away scot-free because they weren't destroyed on purpose. Travelers Group also merged with Citibank to form Citigroup, a company whose name recurs throughout this, and who were believed to be one of the most culpable parties for the dot-com bubble. Enron. It's Enron. So let's say hypothetically you had a property owner who, okay, I'm gotta choose my words carefully here. Let's say you had a property owner who was able to find a silver lining, say a $4.55 billion insurance payout. Then let's say you had a financial sector who was also able to find a silver lining, a chance to dispose of a whole lot of extremely incriminating records relating to looming prosecution following the dot-com bubble. Okay, Now, let's combine those two things with the explicit, factual, and officially acknowledged statement that we had extensive advanced knowledge that an attack was going to occur. We'll get to how all this connects in a minute. Bear with me. But first, I need to explain something that gets kind of complicated. So, by this point, basically everyone is aware that we had foreknowledge of the attacks. There's the famous quote about the alarms flashing red since 1999. In fact, the failure of the FBI and CIA to play nice with each other and cooperate regarding sharing intelligence is actually kinda indirectly how we got Palantir. But something else that is officially acknowledged, albeit quietly, public information is that two of the hijackers were, during the 90s, perhaps slightly, a little bit, definitely CIA recruits. So I'm going to break this down as simply as I can. In 2021, a court document was declassified about concerns relating to a suppressed and ignored investigation following 9/11 into two of the hijackers potentially having been on CIA payroll via Saudi Arabia as an intermediary. It would work like this. Basically, money went from DC to the Saudi embassy. It's then wired out of the country from the Saudi embassy to mainland Saudi Arabia, where it is then dispersed to a man named Omar al-Bayoumi via a no-show, no-work job he held at a Saudi government contracting company called Erkan. He then brings the money back to the U.S. to give to Al-Hazmi and Al-Midhar, the hijackers, to cover their rent and lifestyle. In exchange, they were attempted to be recruited as CIA assets embedded in Al-Qaeda. Now, this raises the question, how did two known Al-Qaeda members get into the U.S.? Well, we let them in. Yo, these guys are in Al-Qaeda. Shut up, baby, don't worry about it. Do you know these guys? No. So why were the Saudis involved? Well, this was a joint U.S.-Saudi intelligence operation involving Alex Station, a CIA station within Saudi Arabia. Beyond that, though, the Central Intelligence Agency is officially forbidden from conducting any operations domestically, which required them to use Saudi intelligence agents as proxies within the U.S. This arrangement dated back to the 1970s with the creation of the so-called Safari Club, which is a whole other can of worms that is far too deep to cover here and would definitely get this video taken down if covered, because of the fact that one of the countries who was a member of the Safari Club was, the one you're thinking about. Now, I'd like to make a note here. Sometimes with this channel, I am forced to make tough decisions about whether to include everything and instantly have the video taken down, or to truthfully mention as much stuff as I am capable of mentioning without getting completely deplatformed. Anyone who feels that I'm leaving some stuff out is more than welcome to make their own video covering what they feel I missed. So, what do we have here so far? We have a property owner who stands to make a pretty penny, or more specifically 455 billion pretty pennies, who is directly connected to an evacuated building holding a whole lot of remarkably flammable and remarkably incriminating documents. We also have a U.S.-Saudi intelligence operation deeply embedded into Al-Qaeda with advanced knowledge of an attack. But what bridges the gap between these? Well, remember our friend and Larry Silverstein's very close friend, Presidential Medal of Freedom recipient David Rubenstein. When did he get that? Under the Reagan administration? This year. If you recall, he was a bigwig at the Carlyle Group. The incredibly shady private equity firm with as many intelligence community ties as they had oil and defense investments. Recall, if you will, one of their major asset management clients was the ultra-wealthy bin Laden family. Ironically, the same bin Laden family with whom David Rubenstein was meeting the morning of 9/11. Hopefully, this has been a helpful primer under the sort of state of the world and historical backdrop and context of 9/11. Now, one thing I would like to emphasize here. It's important to not let things like this lead you to get lost in the sauce of conspiracy theories. As we all know, it is ludicrous to imply that every floor of this building collapsed simultaneously due to anything other than the obvious blazing inferno.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.